Hey, everybody, this is Pastor Danny, and welcome to Elisha's Bears. Thank you for listening in today, and also for the following the podcast. If you're not doing that, I'd encourage you to do that. That helps me a lot. I'm very excited today about having a conversation about something that I've had a lot to do with in my work as a pastor. Over the course of my ministry, I've done about 600 funerals in the course of my life, and I've always wanted to talk to people who work in the funeral home business. And today we have Holly Gamble Meyer, who is the president and pre-need planning advisor of Holly Gamble Funeral Home in Clinton, Tennessee. And I've also got Lindsay Copeland, who is a licensed funeral director and embalmer. Did I get that right, you two?
Yes.
Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong. I'll start with you, Holly. Holly Gamble is the oldest owned and operated funeral home in Anderson County, Tennessee, and has been locally owned and operated since 1923, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
We were talking about this before we got started, but apparently there is a difference between a family-owned funeral home and a corporate-owned funeral home. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I've only dealt with the family owned operated business because that's what our family's done. Lindsay, right out of mortuary science school, went and worked for a corporate funeral home just north of Nashville. Dealing with families or even past employees that have worked for corporate, a lot of times you're dealing when you walk into those funeral homes, the faces of some of those people that are working there because they live there in the community, but the higher up and the ones that make all the decisions, they're in another state. So a lot of the corporate side, after even talking to some of the employees or the individuals that have worked for corporate funeral homes, they're based off sales. I guess one of my problems with the corporate side of it is it's not about the family themselves. It's more so, I mean, they push sales, push sales. Like I said, the people that work there, they're great people, but they have to go off of what their higher up is telling them what to do. A lot of their pricing structures and what they charge families, I don't think is right. So, and Lindsay can talk a little bit more as far as which the corporate side she worked for wasn't as large as some of the other ones here because there's 2 or 3 that are in Knoxville. I think some of their headquarters are based out of Texas, but it's just a different atmosphere. And I guess Lindsay can kind of talk a little bit. It's kind of what her dealings are with the corporate.
Okay, well, let me let Lindsay jump in a minute. But Lindsay, if you don't mind, how did you get started in the funeral home business? Was this something that you're already laughing, but was this something that you wanted to do all along, or was this something you discovered along the way?
It's something that I discovered along the way. I was a student in high school looking to follow the nursing path or some type of medical field path. I took some classes in high school following the medical side of things, medical terminology, medical therapeutics, different classes like that. And in one of my health classes, my teacher had different professionals come in and speak to us on certain days, and there was a funeral director that came in one of those days, and she got to talking to us, and I just kind of became interested in what she had to say. So shortly after that, I came actually to Holly Gamble here and spoke to Mr. Gamble and asked if I could shadow to see if that would be something that I would be interested in. And he was gracious enough to give me that opportunity years ago, and the rest is history. I ended up loving the job, and I went straight to mortuary school after high school. But I'm the first generation funeral director and embalmer in my family. Got a lot of weird looks when I kind of announced that this is something that I wanted to do, but it was
It makes for an interesting holiday.
random. Yeah, definitely interesting holidays.
I-
It wasn't because of being a first generation funeral director. It was more of it was just kind of falling into my lap, really.
Yeah. Well, I was doing some reading about some of the things that go on in the funeral home, and neither one of you can weigh in on this, but it says there were 4 things that typically happens. There's the transportation of the body from the place of death, care of the body, you file the death certificate, and transportation to the burial site. Does that sound, generally speaking, the way it goes?
It is. I mean, from the time you pick up somebody, there's the planning part, if a family's going to do an open casket with the public viewing, you've got the embalming with the cosmetizing, filing of the death certificate, scheduling those services for the families and, coordinating everything with the clergy or the singers, putting the DVDs and everything together. But yeah, you kind of touched on, there's the pickup, there's the prep, getting permits if somebody's going to be cremated, the services, arrangements, and then the graveside or cremation.
I think I was talking to you, Holly, about this, and really, this is for either one of you. When you go to pick up the body, not just anyone can do that. Does
No,
it take a special person to be able to do that and deal with that situation?
absolutely. And we've heard that several times. Well, anybody can go on a removal call. And the thing is when I've learned in other life experiences, when you walk into a situation or you meet somebody for the first time, that first impression that that person has on you is something that will stick with them. Most of the time.
Right.
And, when you go into a home and you're with a family that's had a loss of a loved one and you're removing their loved one from their home for the last time. It takes a special person to go in there and talk to the families and comfort them. You have to have love. You have to have compassion. There's sometimes where, it's hard. It's almost like you kind of have to hold your composure because it's such a sad moment that here you are taking their loved one from their home the last time. That'll be the last time they're ever there. And you yourself trying to stay strong and not get emotional. And I guess the older I've gotten, the more emotional I've gotten dealing with families when it's like you want to do what you can to try to take that hurt away from them. But, I think that's one thing that being in the funeral industry that is important is trying to make one of the darkest, most hardest times of their life as easy as you possibly can for them. Taking burdens. One thing that Lindsay and I both touched on, I think that was kind of a question you would ask is what other life experiences have you had that's maybe opened your eyes up to different things? And I lost a special needs brother about 12 years ago. And I had been here with dad for the funeral home with probably 20 or so, 10 or so years. I had been dealing with death. But after the loss of him, that was the closest thing I had ever had to me that had passed away up to that point. Being the family and dealing with that, you've got so much going on in your mind. Your phone's ringing off the hook. There's people coming in to see you. It's so easy to get distracted. Having somebody there that helps you just stay on track. And one of the things I remembered that after this with my brother, I was like, you know what? We need to start doing a checklist for our families. Like as far as, okay, this is what we need to do. We need to go get the casket spray. We need to send the pictures to the funeral home for the memorial DVD. What songs, we need to get with the pastor. We need to get back to the funeral home as far as what songs we need to play. We need to put an obituary together. Just something just to kind of help instruct them on things that they still need to do during the arrangement time and, before the services.
Well, there's a lot that goes into it as you were talking about that. I'm going to kind of pick on Lindsay for a
Oh,
second
yeah, pick on
here.
Lindsay.
Thank you.
Did you tell me how long you've been in the funeral home business, Lindsay? How long has that been?
So I'm starting my 15th year in this fall.
Okay. When you started this and where you are now, if you were to say, has there been anything that has surprised you in terms of you thought this was going to be this way, and now that you've been doing it for 15 years, have there been any surprises or lessons you've learned along the way?
I guess one of my biggest, not really surprises, something I guess I just didn't really think about, was when I became a mom, how inconvenient death can actually be.
Well,
um,
that's a quote right there.
yes, it's very inconvenient, and it takes a lot of sacrifice to be able to do this job, and not just on the removal part of things. It's the night services, the long hour. It takes sacrifice to do that, and that's always something that I knew, but I didn't understand it fully until I had a child, and like trying to balance life as a mom, life as a funeral director, life as an embalmer. That was one of the things that has been hard for me, and a good lesson to learn was just, and not that the family wants to be in that situation. I've had to take a step back a lot of times and say, you know what, this is inconvenient for me, but look at what they're going through.
I would imagine you're dealing with these families, and in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I have a family too.
Right.
And I was curious, and this is really for either one of you, with the number of details you have to sort through with these families. Are most of the family members in sync or in agreement about what has to happen? Or are those occasions where you find there's some conflict among the family, and how do you deal with that?
And I think in the last couple of years, it's something that we're seeing more and more of. I mean, there's a lot of families that don't get along. They've been estranged with each other for years, and there's a lot of differences. People don't agree on things. And, we try to be the mediator, you know, the best we can, but when they still can't make decisions and they're still not getting along, I think it's kind of part of our job that, like, guys, this isn't about you. This is about the person that we're here to honor. And, a lot of times when, you explain that, a lot of times families kind of back off and they do get together and they start trying to work together a little bit. But I mean, there's a lot of times where families see differences and no one wants to agree upon the other one's decision.
Well, along those lines, I would imagine there have been stories or situations that you've had to deal with that you can think about. Have there been any unusual or especially difficult situations that you've had to deal with through the years?
Being in the funeral industry, I mean, it's a calling people will never fully understand. I mean, it's a sacred, emotional, exhausting, and sometimes just unusual. I mean, one moment you're comforting a family whose world has stopped. And the next moment, Lindsay's talking about being a mother. And then so here you're dealing with the family. And then the next thing, you're going to watch your children play sports, or with me being involved with cattle, I'm going to
Gosh.
the barn working with show cattle, or I'm helping my husband pull a calf. And you just kind of learn to carry that sorrow quietly and still function, in this world.
Would it be safe to say you have to learn to compartmentalize?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's times where people ask me and they come in here and they're like, I don't see how you can do what you do. And I think being involved is after they've passed, I could not work trauma, or I couldn't do that and not bring it home with me. I couldn't work St. Jude's Hospital and deal with children that are terminally ill. I couldn't leave that at work. I would bring that home and it would bother me. This industry, there are times where it's harder than others, but for the most part, when you leave at the end of the day, you can leave some of those sad times and moments at work and not bring them home with you.
And sometimes I call it like the biggest blessing and curse. Those moments do make you want to, it makes your life change on how you live in too. Yes, we can leave it here at work, but also it makes you want to be better, if that makes sense. And like it pushes you to live differently than what you would.
And I mean, I guess, being in this industry, I mean, we see some of the unexpected beauty in tragedies. And that's one of the quiet, sacred truths of being in the funeral industry. I mean, in the middle of a heartbreak, you witness things that most things that people never see. A family that hasn't spoken in years, you see them
Mm.
reunited. Family members that are talking about memories, and then they hear a story about their loved one that they had never heard before. A spouse or a family member going and kissing their loved one on the forehead after decades of love. After breaking through tears as memories are shared around a casket when they've gone in to see that person for the first time. So, I mean, there's unusual experiences, but I mean, there's also times where if we weren't in this industry, that we wouldn't see some of these experiences that we see with families.
Well, you've kind of been alluding to this, but I'm guessing the kind of work you're doing is not for everybody. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the preparation or education or some of the skills that you might need to work in the funeral home?
And that was one thing that we've touched on actually just a few minutes ago. Lindsay can contest to this because she came and worked here at our funeral home before she decided she wanted to pursue.
Shadowing, very important to shadow.
Right.
It's like a
It's
mentoring,
going to
yeah.
a funeral home and work. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. But when they come in here and they see the ins and outs, or they go in the prep room and they see what they do as far as embalming, you need to go work at a place before you decide if you're going to pursue
Career.
a career in it.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
sorry, a career. Um, And I mean, we've had several that have come in here. They're dead set. That's what they want to do. And after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, they change their mind. So, I mean,
So, so wanting to do it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to do it, right?
absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
You got to be empathetic. You've got to be compassionate.
Mhm.
But then you've got to be a little tough sometimes, like to navigate these more difficult families and difficult cases. You got to be able to read a room. You've got to be able to connect with different types of people. Sometimes it's not words that you need. Sometimes you just need to listen.
And patience is
Patient, yeah.
something else.
No,
When you're when a family's grieving, there's so many emotions that get wrapped up in the middle of the arrangement time and stuff. And is sometimes not taking things that they may say personal.
Right.
When you're hurting and you're grieving, there's sometimes where people don't know how to cope with it. They say things to you that is just, I mean, having to kind of bite your tongue. I mean, sometimes is just understanding. I don't know what this person's going through. My job here is to be there to comfort them. And a lot of times after the services and stuff like that are over and they come to their thoughts a little bit better. I mean, a lot of times they'll come in and they'll apologize for their actions. But I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you just can't let things like that bother you because every family's different. Some people know how to deal with grief. Some families don't.
Well, I would imagine some of the deaths are anticipated if it's been a long life, and some of them are
Yes.
sudden. I was curious when you're dealing with families, has the decision already been made about a cremation or embalming? And I'm guessing it's important to treat the body with respect above everything else, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
sometimes that's not a decision that's made though upon meeting us. Sometimes it's again being patient, talking about each option, and then the family kind of discussing that amongst themselves. And then sometimes that's not always decided as soon as the death occurs.
Which, I
Well,
mean, traditions have changed in the funeral industry in the last, even since I've been here. Because when I first started working with my dad in 1997, cremations were probably 7% of our calls.
Right.
I mean, you mentioned cremation to a family, and you got frowned upon very quickly. But that's one thing that the funeral industry, there's more and more cremations. I mean, it went from 7% in 1997 to about 58% to where it is now. And a lot of times, I mean, with cremation is a lot of people go with cremation because it's the cheaper way. Sometimes it may be cultural beliefs, religious beliefs. A lot of people are going green. They don't want to have to bury something metal in the ground. The thing is with cremation is you're not rushed to do anything. You could do a celebration of life months after that person passed away. One thing that I always heard my dad, Danny, say that he kind of disagreed a little bit with cremation is because a lot of times with burial, you have a place to go back to remember your loved one. A lot of times with cremation, people go scatter ashes or something, but you don't have that place to go back to from where they were buried.
so there's that emotional side. I know in a small town like ours, this might be different in larger communities. And I think you mentioned this before, but especially in a small town, it seems like everybody knows everybody. And
Yes.
you have people that you work with in difficult situations. And you mentioned we're not always at our best in times of grief. There's a personal side to working with families and then maybe seeing them out in the community. What is that like?
You do see, I mean, it's going up and being, friendly. I mean, I think, when somebody's going through a hard time is going up and giving them a big hug and asking how they're doing. One thing about death is, when that happens, there's so much going on. People are coming to your home. You've got family coming in, you're planning, but a lot of times it's after the fact, after the services are over. Your loved ones have gone back home. That's when I feel like a lot of people need you more than that time right after, shortly after somebody passes away. People tend to sometimes forget. And here you've got somebody that's at home that's not wanting to get out. And I think that time is critical for people to call and check on a loved one is a month after that person's passed away, just checking on them, going and seeing them. A lot of times after somebody passes, people get in their homes and they don't want to get out. They want to stay home. They don't want to get out in the community. And I think that's a lot of times when you've dealt with the loss of a loved one that it bothers you is when you're sitting at home and you're not getting out and talking to people.
If someone were to, and I'm going to imagine, Lindsay, you were mentioning you've been doing this about 15 years. and I guess someone was talking to you about it in a classroom setting. If someone were to come up to either one of you and say, "Hey, and you mentioned this before, I'd like to work in the funeral home industry," what would you tell them to expect, and would you recommend it?
I would definitely recommend it. I love my job. I think it's one of the most rewarding jobs that we have. When realizing life is a gift, it helps you to live better, like I've mentioned before. But I would tell them to be ready. I would tell them the demand. I mean, it can be very demanding. You're pushed to the limits a lot of times physically, emotionally, mentally. There's a lot that goes into it. And I would tell them to just always remember why you're here. We're here for these families. We're here to be a guidance for them and to love on them. And that's what I would tell them is, yes, this job is rewarding. You need to think about these certain things, but always remember why you're doing it.
So it's not for everyone, but for those who are able to do this, it could be a meaningful way of life. Being careful not to. Is it hard to take what happens at work home with you? Or are you able to kind of leave it at where it is?
That's a big lesson that I've learned throughout my career. I used to take it home with me, but when I did become a mom, I realized there's things that I'm not able to take home with me. I've got to have a separation. That's one of the hard lessons that I've learned because it can consume you, and I've been there. And that was something that I'm very thankful earlier on that I learned was it's okay to leave it here. I've got my own family that I have to put to put first, and sometimes it does mean leaving those things here at work.
One of the challenges we had, and I've been working with Holly trying to set up a time to do this. I threatened if we couldn't work this out, I was going to interview Blair and a couple of your dogs if we couldn't do that. But we were trying to set this up, and I sympathize with that a little bit with what I do. But you indicated that every day is different. And I'm guessing, especially in your case, is that true? Do you tend to make a schedule, or do you find
Oh,
that the schedule
schedule.
makes
Yeah,
you?
we can't
I mean,
schedule
and
anything.
my mom's told me this. You need to get a schedule, which we do have a schedule that we kind of like as
Right.
far as, hey, we need to do this tomorrow, we need to do that, or like if somebody's coming in to pre-plan or coming in buy cemetery plots. But that's one thing about this industry. I mean, you're on call 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know from minute for minute, from hour to hour, from day to day. There's times where we've had long days here, and it's just like, gosh, we're finally able to get home,
Right.
get kicked back on the couch, and you're not unwinding for 2 minutes, and you get that
Yeah.
call, and you're going to have to go out. You've got a death call.
Well, wasn't this true back in the day before cell phones and that kind of thing? And this might be true with your business, but you'd have somebody actually spending the night there at
Yes.
the business.
Yeah.
That's
Does
been
that still
kind of
happen,
recent.
or
Oh
did?
yeah.
Yeah, that was when I got in the business. Holly, Miss Campbell had folks here that would actually stay the night.
This building was never left unattended up until, gosh, probably 5 or 6, well, maybe 7 years ago. Time kind of
Yeah.
gets away from us. But yeah, there was somebody here at this funeral home 24/7. So we roll over to an answering service after a certain time. If that family calls the funeral home and they need to talk to us, usually I'm the telephone number that they call, or if I'm out of town, it's usually transferred to Lindsay or Kate, one of the other girls that's here at the office.
I just thought about this, just ballparking it. About how many funerals would you say that you do in a given year? I mean, I know, do you
So
keep records of those things?
we do. Of course, our largest year, Danny, was COVID, which was 2021, 22. We did basically 100 calls. We did 100 more calls that year than what we had done in previous years. Our average volume now is usually between 300 to 320 right now. 2025 was a busy year for us. 2026 so far has started out. We've been pretty busy this year. And I mean, another reason I think that our volume, the call volume is increasing too, is this area we live in. It's not getting any smaller. There's more and more people that are moving into this area than what used to live here.
Well, one of the things that, Holly, I think I was reading on the website is you work with pre-planning.
hmm
What is that?
So that's basically families coming in, and a lot of times people come in, they want to pre-plan because they've sat there, they've gone through the arrangement process. They see what it does to your family members as far as picking out the service you want, picking out the casket, what type of service, what do you want to have played as far as music. Where these families come to us and we sit down, we get the vital information we need as far as information we need when that person passes for the death certificate, Social Security. And then we start talking about services. Do you want a visitation and a funeral service? Want your service at the church? Is finding out what type of service they want, letting them go ahead and pick out their casket, what casket they want, their outer burial container. A lot of times we'll go ahead and get maybe what music they want to have played, or if there's a certain, anybody they want to have sing at their service, or a minister that they want to have say a few words. Is having all that stuff done when that time comes. So that way the family, all they're doing is we're scheduling the times. We're getting an obituary put together. We're letting them proofread the death certificate before we get that sent to the doctor. And I mean, it makes that process, so much easier on families when they do
What
that.
about
Plus, another
mentioning,
thing that's huge too, Danny, is if families come in and they want to go ahead and pay for everything. Well, we can't just go put that money into our account. We trust it with an insurance company. And when you pay for that, you're guaranteed the price of our services and everything that day. So you're locking in that price. And the way we're able to do that is when we trust this money with an insurance company, it sits in there and it draws interest. And the interest is what helps cover the inflation on your funeral going up over the years. It's on a prearrangement contract that we can't honor is like obituaries. We don't know. That's something that's outside the funeral home. We don't know what that charge is going to be. Cemeteries, we don't have control over their charges. A lot of times families go ahead and put those extras on the bill, but when that time comes, if it's gone up, a lot more, that's just an additional thing that the families owe. But as far as our services, merchandise, it's locked in.
well, this is kind of a self-serving question. You mentioned some of the people you have to work with and ministers or those. I've been back in the back office and I see, I guess you have a chart or whatever, and then you're looking forward to this service coming up, and then you see the minister's name up there. Are there some of us easier to work with than others when you're looking at funeral services? Do you kind of have an idea of what to expect once you've worked with a couple of us for a while?
We do. Up until my dad's health declined, a lot of times I wasn't here for a lot of the funeral services. So, of course, Danny, I've known you. I've worked several services with you and some of the other ones. As far as most of the ministers and things like that, I think everybody gets along with pretty good. I do know, like, over the years of hearing some ministers, when they come in, you're here for that family. You're here to honor that loved one. And the only problem I've had with the couple, which we haven't seen them that much, is when they come in and they try to dictate and they don't do the services the way that the families want them to do. I don't agree with that. Where they've got it set as far as what they want, songs they want to have played, the way that they want the service to be run. But then the minister comes in, they're like, no, it's not going to be done that way.
Wow.
And
So
I'm
the
like,
minister will go rogue, is what you're saying?
oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Which doesn't thankfully happen a whole lot
no,
in our area.
no,
We're
but
pretty lucky to have some good
yes.
That's what I'm
ministers around.
saying. It's a reminder that we're there for the family, not the other way
Absolutely.
around.
Right.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that I did, it's been a couple months ago, but we had one that did that. They were rude and just not very compassionate with the family, and they didn't want to do the services the way the family wanted them to be done. And when the minister walked off, I went up to him and I said, listen, this isn't about her. This is about you and your loved one. If this is how you want it to be done, you need to tell her. So that's been my hardest thing. And there's only been maybe 2 or 3 that I've seen that are like that. That's a little disheartening.
Yeah. Well, we can talk off camera about the rest of them. I mean, we don't have to
Yeah.
get into that.
We know who's long-winded and who's
Yeah.
short.
Oh, yeah. That's another. Oh, gosh. I
Yes.
know.
Well, look at the time. Lindsay, this is for you. I'm going to toss this out to you. Unless my math is wrong, Holly Gamble started in 1923. I'm going to guess, Lindsay, you weren't around at that time.
No.
She just ages really good, Danny.
Yes. Okay. You hinted at some of this, but I would imagine there have been some scientific and technological advances and changes over the years. Are funerals and preparation pretty much the same, or have you been able to notice some differences along the way? Because Holly, you mentioned that it seems like cremations are becoming a little bit more acceptable than they used to be. But in terms of the preparation of the body, if that's the right language, what do you make of that?
Of someone's loved one. I don't think that's really changed much. Chemicals may have changed, but chemicals, we have different ones that do certain things, if that makes sense. And for the most part, I don't think those have really changed drastically over the years. The names may have, and the makers and different things like that. As far as preparation, I don't believe it's changed drastically. The funeral business itself, though, I mean, I've seen a lot of
Mhm.
differences just in my 15 years. Like we kind of mentioned earlier, people staying at the funeral home 24/7. There's none of that anymore. A lot of funerals use the answering service. Actually, I don't know of anybody who
I
doesn't use
know,
answering
I know.
service.
Or used 2 years ago, people would go to the family's home for a visitation, and the body would stay there at their home. And then
But
when
do
I was
people do I'm sorry,
still
do people still do a wake anymore?
away, it's pretty much a same thing as a visitation.
Yeah, but it's not like an overnight thing where you keep the body at the house?
No,
No.
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 Or used to, it was a 2-night deal. You had family one night, you had friends the next night. Even since COVID has changed a
Has
lot of
changed.
stuff. There's not a lot of the traditional services, the receiving of friends with the funeral service to follow in the evening and the graveside the next day. Another tradition that has changed is I remember when I came here and started working with my dad in 1997, it wasn't anything for somebody to pass away and there'd be 20 to 30 pieces of flower pieces in there. We had a flower van that we transported flowers to the cemetery. Now you don't see very many flower pieces.
Yeah.
Attendance has gone down a
Yes.
lot, especially since COVID. I've noticed a big change in attendance. Funerals that we think are going to be large turns out not to be so
So
large.
large.
Do
Attendance is
most people like to have them at night, these funeral services, or does it vary?
well, that's kind of more traditional in our area. However, I feel like folks are kind of getting away sometimes from the
Mhm.
traditional. I mean, there's been so many people that we've picked up and we automatically think, well, it'll be a traditional
Traditional
funeral
service.
service, and
Nope.
it's not. It's a graveside only, or it's a cremation, or people's wishes, I think, have just become different. Last
And used to, it was called a funeral service. A lot of times now people are calling it more of a celebration of life.
Right.
So words matter, right?
Yeah.
What do people not know? This is subjective on your part. What are some things that people don't know about a funeral home that they might be surprised to know or might be good for them to know? Go ahead, Lindsay.
I think the preparation, I feel like people should have a knowledge of what happens here. Like when I first shadowed, the preparation wasn't as bad as I had mentally prepared myself for, if that makes sense. I think people would be surprised at that. I think people would be surprised a lot of times at how informal funerals have become. And that's
Mhm.
kind of one thing that has changed throughout the years. Kind of more as a celebration, they've been more personable, but then they've also kind of become a less formal type of gathering, if that makes sense.
Almost
Yeah.
like church. I mean, used to when
Yeah.
I was growing up, you didn't go to church on Sunday morning without a dress on or a man to be in a suit and tie. Now you go to church on Sunday and there's people dressed in all different kinds of outfits and attire.
I think people are surprised. One thing I've heard over the years going on death calls, especially in the middle of the night, people still think that we stay here through the night. And I've actually had a family ask me, "Do you all sleep in your dress clothes?" And I
Oh,
think people would be surprised at the humor that we hold. Like the funeral home isn't just a dreadful place. Like we try to.
Oh yeah.
We're pretty funny people when
well,
it
well,
comes.
I believe you when you say that, Lindsay, but
Mm.
that was one of the things, just knowing you a little bit, just a personal connection, personality and the humor. It's okay to have humor at appropriate
Oh,
time, isn't it?
absolutely.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
have to.
you do.
Yeah, we have to.
You do. There's time when business is business. I mean, but like she said, you have to find, it's life. You've got to find humor and the good in it.
And that goes
Yeah.
into kind of what I said earlier about reading the room. There's families
Yes.
that we walk in and they want to laugh. But then there's also families that we walk in and they don't even want to speak.
There's no emotions.
Yeah, their emotions are so different. Families are so different. The circumstances of death really determines a lot of that as well. But I mean, there's been many families that have just wanted to laugh
Yeah.
through arrangements in a respectful way.
This is something that, and Holly, you mentioned this before. You all have started a grief support group
Yes.
at the funeral home. I found that to be just remarkable. What was the motivating factor in doing that?
You know, it was something that I've thought about over the years, and occasionally we'll have a family member or a family that'll come and ask, do you recommend or do you know any places that we could call for counseling or grief support? And I know a lot of churches do it. I think there's maybe two here in in Clinton that do it. I know there's a couple in Powell. And after I got to thinking, I was like, we're the ones that's dealing with these families that's had a loss of a loved one. And I'm kind of one of those individuals that I like to be kind of the first one that starts something. And I thought, there's not another funeral home here in Anderson County that's doing grief support. So I thought back in December, and I woke up about 2:00 in the morning. I thought of Vicki Violet to call, and she's helped me, put this together. And, I think it's something, Danny, that, we've had two so far. Granted, the more people is great. But I think one thing about when somebody's grieving and there's a lot of people that's there, I don't think a lot of times people are going to be wanting to talk about their emotions and their feelings. I'm hoping that really it doesn't get over maybe 15 max. I'm the type of person I don't like to talk about my feelings or what I'm going through in front of a crowd of people. And I think if it stays small, you're going to do more one-on-one with people. It's where, these people that come, we've talked about getting everybody's telephone numbers and all of us being on a group text together. So that way we can check on each other. We can call each other. I just thought it was just something for our funeral home to start for our families if it's something that they want to be involved in.
Well, I've got you for a few more minutes, and I'm going to Holly Gamble Funeral Home, and this might be true of other family-owned funeral homes too, but you're very much in the center of the community. And I'm thinking about just a little bit from my work. You never know from day to day something that might happen. You could deal with a tragedy. You could deal with someone that's elderly who have died. You deal with wealthy people. You can deal with poor people, different races and backgrounds. Does it ever dawn on you really about the importance of what you do for the community and the impact that you have on the lives of the people who live around here?
I think absolutely. I think being in this profession, it's a calling. And as Lindsay and I both talk, it takes a special person to deal with this in this industry, coping with families that have had a loss of a loved one. One thing about this business is, there's not a lot of jobs that people work at where you feel appreciated in some of the work that you do. And that's one thing that we have found here at this business is when you help a family get through one of their darkest times and helping them get through the arrangements and planning and for them to come after the services or after the graveside and they're coming back to the funeral home and they're thanking you for that experience. They're telling us you made one of the hardest times of our lives and easy for us. That means a lot to us. And that is one thing I feel like we feel appreciated. And in some professions that some people do, you work day in and day out and you never get that thank you. And a thank you goes a long ways to let them know that you feel appreciated.
And then these
Well,
people that have become like family.
Oh, yeah.
I've buried people's loved ones, and I was just texting one yesterday. Like
Mhm.
the family that's been years ago, and I've become friends with them. I watched a lady who I buried her husband, went on the death call, worked the service, had no idea who she even was. We text, and
Mhm.
I saw her. She got remarried, and she said, I just want to thank you for being a part of all my milestones. And she said, I never will forget the kindness. And I never will forget what you meant to me during that time. And that for a text to come through like that,
Oh, yeah.
it makes all the long nights and why am I doing this? It makes it all.
you might want to save that one, Lindsay. I don't think
Well,
I'd
and
delete
I
that one.
think the
Yes.
thing is,
I
though,
keep all my thank you cards, all my notes.
she does.
I
She
do.
does.
They're in my desk for when I have a day that I'm wondering why.
Danny, I guess I wouldn't have what I've got today if it wasn't for my dad.
Okay.
If you would have asked me when I was in high school if I was going to come back and work at the funeral home, I'd have laughed and been like, you lost your mind. I wanted to be a vet. That's what I wanted to do. And, when you're in your 18, 20, who knows what they want to do the rest of their life. And Dad came to me in 1997. He said, hey, he goes, I don't think you know really what you want to do. He goes, why don't you come back and work at the funeral home? And I thought, well, okay. He goes, but now if you're not going to go to school, he goes, you're going to work. And I was like, okay. So, over the years, since I was a little girl, I watched my dad and the hours he poured into this business. My dad not being home have dinner with his family. Him, because of him having to work visitations, having to leave a family vacation early because he had a family that had a loss of a loved one that he just felt, you know what, I need to be there. The late night calls that he would get home and having to leave without hesitation. I saw the weight that he carried. I learned early that his work isn't about the business. It's about the people. Growing up, I watched a man that never clocked out. Even though my father doesn't come to the funeral home like he once did because of his illness, I'm here to honor him and continue the legacy and reputation he built here over the years. His commitment, his dedication to serving families with compassion and integrity. He has shaped me for who I am today. I strive to uphold the standards he set, ensuring that every family who walks through our doors feels the same respect and care that he always provided. The legacy is more than a tradition. It's a promise to the community and a testament to the trust he earned and the responsibility, I'm proud to embrace. I was very fortunate to have a father like mine in my life. He's probably one of the biggest hearted, most giving individuals that I have ever met. My dad's a very laid back person, and I can remember 2 times my dad ever got mad at me. And one of them was a funeral home related situation. I had a curfew to be off the phone at 10 o'clock every night. Well, that was back. Dad had the funeral home line tied into our home line where he could get death calls. Well, I snuck back on the phone one night after I knew Mom and Dad had gone to bed. Well, I fell asleep on the phone. So that was before call waiting. So Dad gets a death call in the middle of the night, and they can't get in touch with Dad because I fell asleep on the phone, and the phone's busy. So they have to come get Dad at the house. So Dad goes down there and they're like, we've been trying to call you. The line's busy. Well, Dad goes upstairs and sees that I've fallen asleep on the phone. And that's the reason that, nobody can get through to him. I remember him, like I said, my dad's not one to get mad, but he literally got the phone, ripped it out of the wall. Cord and everything. Well, going down the stairs at our house, you go straight down the stairs and there's a window, and then did a 90 to go on Dad down the stairs. Dad got that phone and threw it down the stairs. Well, it didn't go. It basically went right through that window. And I thought, it's probably one of the maddest, times I ever. And, I can also, remember Dad, telling so many people, out of all the years that he was here, he goes, there was not one day that I dreaded going to work.
That's a good segue to end on, because I'm guessing from hearing from both of you, and Holly, I agree with what you just said from what I've been able to get to know about your dad. I'm hearing you say going to work and being at work is not something that you dread. It's something that you look forward to. It's a calling, right?
Right.
For each of you.
Right.
Okay.
It's not just what you do. It's who you are. It's what you were raised in, and it's what you believe in. And I've just, like I said, Dad, and it's hard. With Dad not being here, I've walked in his footsteps. I've been a daddy's girl my whole life. Before I got involved in the funeral home industry, showing cattle was a hobby that my dad and I cherished. We went all over the country together. Those are times that I will forever cherish. But to come here and try to walk in his shoes and fill his shoes, I won't ever be the person that my dad has been in this industry, but I try to give it all I've got. But he's a very special man.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being on the podcast today, and I want to thank you for letting me talk with your dogs a few moments ago. I may schedule another podcast episode
for the dogs
with them,
yes,
for later on. But
I guess Dana, you talking about the dogs, which I started bringing them here probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm an avid animal lover, love animals, and I think when I'm dealing with a loss or a heartache or something, there's just nothing better than having an animal around. It just makes your heart happy, kind of takes your mind off the situation. And we have some families that are afraid of dogs or something, but for the most part, everybody walks in, they see the dogs, and it's just like, oh, we weren't expecting to see that. And it just
I was glad to see that you put them on the staff page of the funeral home website.
Be part of that.
Oh yeah,
they are very intuitive with understanding things. But anyway, I know at some point I'll be down your way again to work with both of you. But for our listeners, I want to thank you all for being part of this. We have been listening to Holly Gamble Meyer, President and Pre-Need Planning Advisor of Holly Gamble Funeral Home, and Lindsay Copeland, Licensed Funeral Director and Embalmer. And until next time, thanks for listening.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Danny.